Look at this number, $792. That's not a typo. That's the average American household's projected air conditioning bill this summer, according to the people who track energy poverty for a living. Up over 10% from last year, and that's the national average. Some regions are looking at a jump well above 13%. And if your first thought is, fine, I'll just buy a new unit, bad news. The import tariff on AC equipment just jumped from roughly 8% to 25%. Overnight, replacing your system got a lot more expensive than fixing it. I'm Philip Hayes, 41 years at Bell Labs, solving problems other engineers had already given up on. And I'm going to tell you something the HVAC industry will never put in an ad. In most homes, that $790 number has almost nothing to do with the heat outside. It has everything to do with negligence. Cheap, totally preventable negligence sitting about 15 feet from your back door right now, doing absolutely nothing about it. Give me 20 minutes, I'll show you exactly what's quietly driving that bill up. And the fix that costs less than dinner for two, not a new air conditioner. Let me take you back. Bell Labs, 1974. We didn't design things to fail. We designed things to outlast the engineers who built them. I worked on telephone switching equipment that's still, to this day, running in a handful of rural exchanges 50 years later. Nobody asked us to make it cheap. They asked us to make it work. Every single time in every kind of weather for decades, with technicians who'd retire and hand the maintenance log to someone who hadn't been born when the unit was installed. That was the standard. Not impressive. Standard. The engineering philosophy was almost boringly simple. Assume someone with average tools and 15 minutes will eventually have to service this thing and make that possible. Label everything. Use parts that are easy to source. Don't bury the failure point somewhere clever just to save 4 cents in manufacturing. Now, compare that to what's sitting in your backyard right now. The average residential air conditioner is engineered to a 15 to 20 year lifespan on paper, but most start guzzling power or fail outright years before that, and almost never because the compressor itself wore out. They fail because of small, cheap, completely unglamorous parts that nobody was ever taught to look at, let alone maintain. Here's the part that should bother you. Your AC unit is, electrically speaking, a remarkably simple machine. A motor, a coil, a switch, and one small component I'll get to later, one that's quietly responsible for more dead air conditioners than refrigerant leaks, dirty coils, and bad thermostats combined. But before I get to that, you need to understand why none of this ever shows up as a warning light. Your AC doesn't die all at once. It dies a little every week, and your utility company is the only one keeping score. We had a saying at Bell Labs. I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. Back at Bell Labs, nobody got a bonus for things breaking down. We got fired for it. That's it. That was the whole incentive structure. Compare that to today, where an appliance lasting 20 years instead of 8 is, for a lot of manufacturers, a problem to be solved, not a feature to sell. I've spent the back half of my career documenting exactly how that shift happened, case by case, with paper trails. Some of it makes you angry. Most of it just makes you tired. But all of it is fixable on your end once you know where to look, which is exactly what the next 15 minutes are for. If this is the first time you're here, hit subscribe. I post one of these a week, and they're all built the same way. One expensive modern problem, one old-fashioned engineering fix. No fluff. And while we're talking, I want to know something. What's the oldest appliance in your house that's still running, and do you actually know why? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone, and some of you have stories that belong in a museum. One more thing before Act 2. A lot of the fixes I teach on this channel come straight out of old service manuals and trade school handbooks, the kind nobody prints anymore. I pulled the best of them together for people who want the full reference, not just one video's worth. It's called Ancestral Vault. Links in the description No exact dollar promises from me, just decades of know-how that used to get passed down for free before companies started charging you to diagnose what your grandfather could fix blindfolded. Here's Act 2. What's actually happening inside that metal box in your yard, in plain numbers, not theory, not internet folklore, the Department of Energy's own measurements. A dirty air filter, the cheapest, most disposable part of your entire system, can increase your AC's energy consumption by 5 to 15% just by restricting airflow and forcing the motor to work harder than it needs to, cycle after cycle, all day long. That's bad. Here's worse. When airflow gets restricted long enough, dust and grime bypass the filter entirely and settle directly onto your evaporator coil, the part that actually absorbs heat out of your home's air. A coil that's been allowed to get dirty can lose 20 to 40% of its cooling capacity, not running a little less efficiently. 40% gone quietly with no alarm. Read that again. Your unit isn't broken, it's suffocating. And a suffocating compressor doesn't shut off and to tell you it's struggling. It just runs longer, pulls harder amperage than it was designed for, and quietly adds dollars to every single billing cycle, all summer long. And remember that 25% tariff I mentioned at the start? That's exactly why this matters more this year than most. A few years ago, a frustrated homeowner could shrug and just buy a new unit. This year, with equipment costs climbing on top of an already record electricity bill, the math has flipped hard in favor of fixing what you've already got. Nobody designed this to be a trap, but nobody designed it to be obvious either. There's no dashboard light for your coil is 30% dirtier than it was in May. The only warning you get is a number on a piece of paper a month later that you can't do anything about retroactively. Let me tell you about a system I looked at for a neighbor a few summers back, not as a tech, just as a guy with a flashlight, a pair of work gloves, and 40 years of bad habits. Her bill had crept up almost $60 a month over 2 summers. Nothing broke, nothing tripped. The AC turned on every time she asked it to, blew cold air, kept the house comfortable. As far as she was concerned, the system was working perfectly. She genuinely thought $60 extra a month was just what summer cost now. That's the part that gets me. She wasn't being careless. She just had no reason to think anything was wrong. I pulled the filter. It looked like a wool sweater that had been left out in a dust storm. Behind it, the coil had a visible layer of gray film thick enough that you could write your name in it with a fingertip. 20 minutes with a shop vacuum, a soft brush, and a garden hose, and that was most of the problem solved, right there on a Saturday afternoon. Most of it, not all of it. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Filters and coils explain why a system runs inefficiently. They almost never explain why a system fails outright, or runs fine for 10 minutes, and then mysteriously shuts itself off, or hums for a few seconds before doing anything at all. That's a different part entirely, a part I'm going to show you in a few minutes, because it's the one piece of this whole story that most homeowners have never once laid eyes on. And it is shockingly inexpensive to fix once you know what you're looking at. All right, Act 3. Let's actually fix something. 20 minutes, no technician, no special tools, beyond what's probably already in your garage. Step 1. Find your filter. On central air, it's at the return duct or behind a grill somewhere in the house. Check your manual if you've genuinely never looked. Pull it out. Hold it up to a light. If you can't see light coming through it clearly, it's done. Replace it. Basic pleated filters run about $5 to $15 depending on size, and you should be doing this every 30 to 90 days during cooling season. Write the date on the cardboard frame with a marker so you stop guessing and start knowing. While you're at the thermostat anyway, here's a free one, straight from the people who track national energy data. Every degree you raise your cooling set point saves you roughly 3% on your bill. The Department of Energy's own recommendation is 78 degrees when someone's home and letting it drift higher when the house is empty. That's not a sacrifice. That's just not paying to cool an empty room. Step 2. The outdoor condenser. That metal box outside with the fan on top. Kill power at the disconnect switch first. It's usually a gray box mounted right next to the unit. Now look at the coils around the outside. See any leaves, grass clippings, cottonwood fluff, spider webs packed into the fins? That's airflow your system is fighting through every single cycle, all day, every day. Rinse it from the inside out with a regular garden hose. Never a pressure washer? You'll bend the fins and make things worse, not better. Clear 2 feet of clearance around the entire unit. No shrubs, no stored junk, nothing blocking airflow. This alone, done right, measurably reduces strain on the system. Step 3. While the power's still off, take a careful look. Just look, hands off anything metal, inside the access panel of the outdoor unit, where the electrical components live. You're checking for anything obviously burnt, melted, or corroded. If you see that, that's a call someone situation, full stop. We're not playing hero with anything that looks cooked. One more spot, and then I'll let you off the hook for the manual labor portion of this video. If your system has an indoor evaporator coil, you can actually see some air handlers have an access panel. A light dusting can be brushed away gently with a soft coil brush. If it's caked on, heavily soiled, or you'd have to disassemble anything to reach it. That's a job for a professional with the right cleaner and the right tools. This is the one spot where I'd rather you call someone than improvise. Now, here's where most AC maintenance videos online end. Filter, clean, thermostat, done, go enjoy your savings. And for a lot of people, that genuinely helps. The Department of Energy's own numbers back it up. But if your bill is still climbing after all of that, if your system seems to hesitate before starting, or hums for a second like it's thinking about it, or runs for 10 minutes and quietly gives up, cleaning isn't going to touch it. You're not looking at a dirt problem anymore. You're looking at the part nobody ever shows you. The part that's smaller than a soup can, costs less than a large pizza, and is, by a wide margin according to the people who actually service these systems for a living, the single most common reason a perfectly good air conditioner starts acting like it's dying. It's called a capacitor, and here it is. That gray or black cylinder, sometimes oval, usually tucked right next to the compressor inside that access panel. Its entire job is to deliver a sharp burst of electrical energy to get your compressor and fan motors started, and then keep them running steadily once they're up. Most residential systems use what's called a dual-run capacitor, one part doing the job of two, powering both the compressor and the outdoor fan motor. Without it working properly, your motors either won't start at all, or they'll start weak and stay weak, drawing extra current the entire time they run, every cycle, all summer. The symptoms read almost exactly like what I just described a minute ago. Outdoor unit humming, but the fan isn't spinning. A noticeable hesitation before the system kicks on. Short cycling, where it runs a few minutes and shuts off on its own. Warm air coming through the vents even though the fan's clearly running. Industry data on residential service calls consistently puts a failing capacitor at the top of the list of most common reason an AC system fails, ahead of refrigerant leaks, ahead of motor failure, ahead of almost everything else combined. And the part itself, just the part, not the labor, typically costs somewhere between $8 and $30 depending on its rating. That's not a typo either. $8 to $30 is sitting between you and an air conditioner that's secretly bleeding you $60, $80, $100 extra dollars a summer. You can often even see it failing with your own eyes. A healthy capacitor has a flat top. A dying one bulges, swells, sometimes even leaks a little residue from the seams. Flat is fine. Domed is done. Now, I have to be straight with you here, because I'd rather lose a few seconds of satisfying DIY footage than send anyone to an emergency room. A capacitor stores electrical charge. That charge doesn't necessarily disappear just because you've flipped the breaker. Looking at it, with the power off, checking for that telltale bulge or leak, That's safe. That's just observation. Anyone can do that part. Actually testing its output with a meter or swapping it out yourself is a different category of task. It requires knowing how to safely discharge stored voltage first, every single time, no exceptions. If that sentence made you even slightly uneasy, that's your answer. A basic HVAC service call for a capacitor swap typically runs somewhere around $150 to $200, parts included. And it takes a licensed tech about 20 to 30 minutes. That's the whole story. A $790 bill and the actual chain of failure behind it is almost always some combination of a filter you forgot, a coil you never saw, and a part worth less than a dinner that nobody told you existed. None of this is complicated. None of it required an engineering degree. It required someone to tell you where to look, which, frankly, is exactly what the people selling you a brand new $4,000 unit have very little incentive to do. This isn't a small thing for a lot of families this year. Reporters have been talking to households genuinely rationing their AC use, choosing between cooling the house and other basic bills while the bill keeps climbing regardless. I'm not angry at the heat this summer. I'm a little tired of how much of that bill, for a lot of people, was always quietly optional. So before you do anything else this week, go look. Filter first, coil second, capacitor eyes only third. And I still want to know what you found when you went looking around your own house. What's the oldest appliance you own that's still running? And do you actually know why it's still alive after all these years? Tell me in the comments. I mean it. I've read enough of these stories to fill a second channel, $792. That's the number they handed you for this summer. Behind closed doors, the people who actually understand these machines already know that number was never fixed in stone. It was just what happens to a system nobody taught you to look after. Yours doesn't have to be one of them.